Hey, what's up? Andrew Kramer here, and welcome to another very exciting tutorial. Today, we're going to be taking some green screen footage of Sam Loya and compositing a background in to make it look like he's actually driving. Now, of course, Sam Loya doesn't have a driver's license, so this is really the only way to accomplish this effect. Firstly, we're going to be compositing in 32 bits per channel, so we're going to be taking a look at a pretty cool float workflow. One of the cool things about this tutorial is I'll be showing you how to get a nice clean key out of some Canon 5D footage. Now, usually this footage has a lot of artifacts because of the compression, so we're going to treat it in a way so we can hopefully get a nice clean key right around the edges and make this look as photorealistic as possible. Now, if you want to learn more about how we shot this, go over to the blog on Video Copilot, click on the blog show, and look for the crazy driving video. Some really cool tips. We go behind the scenes with the camera and everything that went into it. There's a lot of great reasons to shoot an interior car scene on the green screen, but the best reason of all is so you can do some crazy wild things you could never do in a real car. You could be sticking your head out of the moonroof, drinking and driving. You don't even have to look at the road. But the most dangerous of all, texting and driving. Hey, we're gonna go to that party. I brought some. Oh shit! Oh no! Now, these techniques are gonna work for daytime footage, and they also work for nighttime footage. So everything that we're gonna be learning should hopefully give you enough information to pull this off in your own studio. And you may not even have a big green screen, but if you have green material, you can throw it over the side of the window. Let's go ahead and get started. We have some footage of Sam Loya. I'm going to take that, drop it into a new comp. Now, as I said, we're going to be working in 32 bits per channel. So what you want to do is Alt or Option click on the 32-bit or on the 8-bit per channel until you get to 32 bits per channel. Now, we'll get into that a little bit later and why that's important, but you want to go ahead and set it up first. All right, in the next step, we want to key out the green. So I'll select our footage, we'll choose Effect, Keying, Key Light. Now, this is a pretty cool effect, and it does a really good job of getting rid of the green. So we'll take the screen color, and we'll click somewhere in here where it's mostly even. We want to be careful not to click on areas that, are changed by the reflection. We want to get the flat color of the green. Now, whenever you put your green screen material up, make sure that it doesn't have a lot of wrinkles or creases because it's important that we leave in some of the detail, and that might be a little bit problematic. So we'll turn this back on, and we have a slight problem. Now, the problem here is that key light is really knocking everything out, and it's just a little bit too strong. So what I might want to do is bring the screen gain down to about 70. And that looks pretty good, but the only problem is now it has a green color tint. So I've lost that color suppression that makes the shot look more realistic. So what we're going to do is a quick little recipe that's going to solve this problem. What we'll do is we'll take the footage and we'll duplicate it. So I'll choose Edit, Duplicate. And we'll take the bottom layer and we're going to take the key light that's applied to it and just delete it. So now what we have is the footage that has the key light on it and basically an original copy of the footage with no effects. What I'm going to do is set the track matte. So if you hit F4, it'll bring up the track matte controls and we'll select Alpha Matte. So what this is doing is using the layer above it as the alpha channel, so as the transparency map, so we can kind of see through the window. But remember, the goal here is to get rid of the green. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to choose Layer, Pre-Compose, and we can just leave the attributes and hit OK. So I'm going to double click on that comp, and this is going to be our suppression comp. All right, my goal is to get rid of the green saturation. Now, one way to do that is I can choose Effect, Color Correction, Hue, and Saturation. Now, this allows me to go into the different color channels like green here and bring the saturation down for just that channel. And it's not a horrible way to do it, but in this case, we really want to maintain some of the subtle detail that's in this reflection. And unfortunately, the hue and saturation is just not a really good solution. So I'm going to delete that. And instead of using that method, I'm going to take our footage, duplicate it, choose Effect, Keying, Key Light, and then I'm going to take the screen color and pick the green here. Now, there's probably a little bit of deja vu going on, but I promise there's no glitch in the matrix. What I want to do is use the color information from the top layer and apply it to the entire image of the bottom layer. So what I mean is when this is set to 100%, it does a nice job of suppressing the color, but it's not quite the solution to our other problem. So we're going to sort of divide the tasks up. So if we look closely, we can see some of the color detail in his arm, and we can see the color on the sticker here. So it looks pretty good, but the only problem is it's transparent. So what I'm going to do is choose Effect, Channel, Channel Combiner. Now, this is an interesting effect that you probably never ever used, and or probably some guys like, well, I used it one time to change my RGB to, well, yeah, all right, take it easy, all right? Most people have never used this effect before. So what we're going to do is set this to straight to pre-multiplied. And that basically brings back all of our color information. And then I'm going to turn on the solid alpha switch. So now we look like the exact image before. So if I turn this on and turn this off, it looks exactly the same. The only difference is the transparent area has now been filled with black. So what that's going to allow us to do is if I hit F4, I can change the transfer mode here. So we'll turn the background layer on. So now we have our original footage and our keyed footage. And I'm going to set the transfer mode to color. So check this out. Now we have all of the green suppressed perfectly. We still see some color in his arm. And we can always play around with the screen balance to fine tune that just right. So 50 works pretty good in this case, but you may want to adjust that value depending on the shot. So now if I go back to our original comp, what I have here is my original plate, and now we have a semi-transparent area that is not tinted by green. So we're well on our way. I have some footage here of a background plate, just a QuickTime movie, and we're going to drop it right to the bottom here. Things are kind of starting to look pretty good already. Now the background window is looking a little bit washed out, and we have a little bit of a halo around his nose. So I'll set that to full resolution, and we can start working on this. So I'll take the top layer that has key light applied to it, and we'll go into the screen matte controls. One of the problems is there's some semi-transparent areas around, so we'll set the clip white to 90. And that's just gonna kind of fill in some of the gaps kind of in the gray areas. So if we set that to about 90, looks a little nicer. And we might set the screen pre-blur to about 1. So that's gonna kind of blur the image before it goes into the key, and it just cleans up some of these rugged edges. Maybe even 0.5 is probably enough. So that looks nice. Now we also want to kind of get rid of the halo here. So we'll set the screen shrink matte to about -2. And that does a pretty good job of getting rid of that. So we'll back up here, and things are looking pretty good. However, the background looks kind of washed out. So what I can do is take our street footage, choose Effect, Color Correction, Exposure, and what I want to do is I want to brighten up the background plate so that the pixels are so bright that they shine through this sort of misty window. So we'll turn the exposure up here. And there we go. Now this is kind of pure white here, and you know the colors are really starting to come through. But I'm starting to see some other areas. So I don't want to see it all blow out. I just want these bright lights to kind of come through. So I'll bring our gamma correction down. And it's basically a matter of tweaking these two settings until the image looks nice and even. So these highlights are going to come through. Now, they get a little bit bright, so we can use an effect called Utility Highlight Compression, HDR Highlight Compression, and it's at the bottom there. And at 100%, it's going to compress all of the highlights down. But we can tweak it here so it doesn't look too blown out. Now, the other thing that's happening from this gamma correction is our image is getting a little bit too saturated. So I'll choose Effect Tint, Color Correction Tint, and we'll put that before the exposure, and we'll just turn that down to maybe 60% or so. All right. So now, why are we working in 32 bits per channel? Well, if we look at the highlights here, and I alt-click on this and go back to 8 bits, everything is going to look pretty bad. It's going to look pretty washed out. The great thing about 32 bits per channel is we can actually work with values. If I bring up our options, hang on a sec here, info. We can actually work with values that are brighter than 1. Now, if we look right here at the RGBA, when I roll over a value, you can see that the RGB is 1.6, you know, that's brighter than white. So when a pixel is brighter than white in 8 bits per channel, it just gets cut off, and you know, if it blends with something semi-transparent, then it's going to turn gray and looks a little muddy. But if we work in 32 bits per channel, those values are actually going to punch through gray values, semi-transparent values, and it's going to give us that nice, vibrant, natural interaction that would probably happen in the real world. So it's a subtle way to do this, but it really makes a big difference, and especially in a composite like this. So another thing that's a bit of a problem is our footage is still a little bit noisy. And then what I would do is go into the key light layer, choose Effect, Noise, Remove Grain. And we'll set this to Final Output. And we'll go into the noise reduction, and we'll set that to maybe about 2 or 3. So if we zoom in here, and we want to put that before the key light. All right, so if we look closely here, we can see a lot of digital noise. And it doesn't look that bad right now, but when it animates, it can be really, really distracting and look very digital. So you can really see it even in this area. The colors are really just flickering all over the place. So if we turn on this Remove Grain, it can be very, very slow, but now you can see the image is a lot smoother and looks a lot more natural. All right, so we've got the Remove Grain effect on, and it's really making our key look very smooth around the edges. And the great thing is we're not actually removing the grain from our original footage. We're only removing it from the keyed layer. And that's important because we don't want to make the footage of Sam look soft. We only want the key to be nice and smooth. You know, when people start getting a little bit soft looking, it looks kind of like they've been photo retouched or something like that. So we want to try to keep our original footage intact as much as possible. So this technique works perfectly for that. So now what we can do is we can start playing around with the footage. So I can shut the Remove Grain off while we work because it doesn't really change the overall look. It only just makes it cleaner when it's in motion. All right, so this is looking pretty good. We might do some color correction and a few last effects. So we'll just do a curves adjustment and maybe a tint effect. I'll turn that down to maybe 20%. And we want this to be kind of dark looking, so we'll just bring the gamma down here. Might take some of this red out. And then I'll add another curve effect on top here. So just some subtle color correction here. And Sam Loya is racing into the night, looking pretty good actually, surprisingly for him. And one more little thing that we can do is we can add a little bit of light on his eyes. So I think in this example, you can kind of see as if the rear view mirror is casting like headlights back onto his face and just kind of some light flickering around. So what we can do for that is pretty straightforward. We'll take the footage where we suppressed the green, we'll open that up. And what I want to do is duplicate the footage that has the key light on it. And I'm going to go ahead and just delete the channel combiner, and I'm going to solo the clip. What I want to do is make a matte where we do knock out all of the background. So the idea behind this tutorial is keying without completely wiping everything out and making it look too sharp and jagged. So instead, we used a soft key technique where things are a little bit softer. And I should also mention that this technique is a collaboration with a friend of mine, Brandon, who has been using this technique for a long time and brought over some of the different capabilities inside of After Effects and works very similarly. So we're going to set the screen gain to a lower amount so that we can kind of see some of those details left in the shot. But for this case, I actually want to crank this up pretty high, and then I'm going to go into the screen matte and crush all of those details. So now we have a really, really sharp, jagged looking matte, and this is perfect for what we need right now. Now the edge is a little hard, so I'll set the screen softness to about 2 or 3, and that looks good. So what I want to do now is create an adjustment layer and a curves effect. So I'll turn up the curve amount, and then we're going to take a rectangle tool and I want to draw a shape right around his eyes. And then I'm going to take another mask and set it to subtract. And if I hit MM, that brings up my mask options. And the second mask, I'm going to turn the mask feather amount up. So if I look closely here, it's going to soften the effect so that it looks like his head is maybe a little more three-dimensional. Now we'll take that first mask and we'll also feather it about 12 or so, maybe a little more than that. So that looks pretty good. Maybe just narrow this down a little bit. All right, so the next thing I need to do is basically animate this layer to follow his face. So I'll hit P, set a stopwatch keyframe, and we'll just try to move this so that it stays on his face. Very good. Goes a little out of frame here. It's okay. All right, so not bad. I mean, the car's bouncing around, so it doesn't need to be perfect. And I'm going to put this now below our sharp key footage that we just created. And I'm going to set the track matte to alpha matte. So now, if I turn my other layers back on, we're basically adding a little bit of light to just the area of his head without affecting the background, and it looks very nice. However, we don't want this to be on, 100% of the time. So I'm going to set the opacity down to 0. And I'm going to add a little expression. So I'll alt-click on the stopwatch, and we're going to type wiggle, parentheses, maybe, 2, 200. We'll try that. And I'll hit 0 here to preview. So that looks pretty good. I think I would probably like it to stay on just a little bit the whole time. So I'll duplicate this, Control D. By the way, if I hold down Control, I can select 2 at a time, and then Control D. And we'll just take the expression off of this bottom one. So I'll just delete it. And we'll set the opacity to maybe 20. Maybe a little more. So that way it's on, but it doesn't really make a big difference. And maybe we'll even feather this one out a little bit more so it's a little softer. All right, so Looks pretty good. So a couple of other quick tips. We have this daytime shot. Now the color correction is a lot more subtle here. The most important thing about getting a good background plate is just making sure that you film it very steady. You don't want it, popping up and bouncing around, because that'll actually make the shot look worse than if the interior car footage is a little bit more shaky. So keep that in mind. And if you need to, you can adjust the footage up or down to kind of make it line up with the eye line or the horizon line. So depending on the angle of your shot, you may want to adjust that just a little bit. And finally, when you're all done rendering, or if you just want to pre-comp it again, you can use that same expression to add some camera shake. So here's a shot with no camera shake. It looks very good, very smooth for a cameraman that's following a car that's going, 60 miles per hour. But if we turn on the camera shake, wiggle 6,45, I'll set that down. We can see it's a little bit more violent, a little bit more vibrating, and we could even crank that up, a little bit more and make it, seem extremely intense. Now I've just scaled the footage up just a little bit so that the black doesn't show, when the frame moves. So you can play around with that. And there's another tutorial. If you type in camera shake into the tutorial section on Video Copilot, you can find some other, cool tips and things for doing some really nice camera shake with some rotation and some other effects. But hopefully this has been a helpful tutorial. And my name is Andrew Kramer. Of course, check out the website, the blog, the forum. A lot of great things happening there. My name is Andrew Kramer, and we will see you next time.